Hello, my name is Germani. I'm a professor of history at the University of Regina, and this is Regina Public Library Film School. In this series, I have been talking about a series of films representing the French experience of war in the 20th century. In today's talk, I'll be considering Gillo Pontecorvo's 1966 film, The Battle of Algiers. In the years since the end of the Second World War, most wars have been asymmetric, pitting powerful, well-equipped armies supported by all the resources of the modern state against apparently much weaker adversaries. Adversaries lacking weapons and money, fighting for a state that exists only in the imagination, but sustained by deeply held political convictions and a powerful sense of grievance. In these unequal contests, war changed its nature. Instead of pitched battles between more or less similarly armed and uniformed soldiers, usually men, fought according to recognized rules of conduct, warfare became a shadowy contest between revolutionaries and counter-revolutionaries, in which one side employed the assassin's bullet and the terrorist's bomb, the other not just the weapons of the soldier, but also the tools of the policeman, the spy, the jailer, even those of the torturer and the executioner. This was the type of war that France fought in its colonial territories of Indochina from 1946 to 1954, and of Algeria from 1954 to 1961. These wars of colonial independence were a foretaste of later wars with which we have become all too familiar. America's war in Vietnam, Russia's and NATO's wars in Afghanistan, the coalition war in Iraq, and the civil war in Syria are just a few examples. The essential features of this type of asymmetric warfare, as they revealed themselves in an urban colonial setting, were exposed with remarkable honesty in the 1966 film by Gillo Pontecorvo, The Battle of Algiers. The film accurately represents the remorseless and ruthless logic of the protagonists on both sides of this episode in the Algerian War, at the same time as it acknowledges the dark places to which that logic led. The Battle of Algiers still engages audiences today, not just because it is a remarkably accurate representation of an historic conflict, but because it unflinchingly exposes the moral issues at the heart of that conflict, issues that are still as relevant today as they were 50 years ago. Pontecorvo's film represents the most important stages in the development of the Battle of Algiers, a struggle for control of the streets of the Algerian capital that took place in 1957. On one side of this struggle was the FLN, the Front de Libération Nationale, which had a clandestine organization of about 1,400 individuals based in the densely populated Arab section of Algiers, the Kasbah. In the summer of 1956, the FLN, under the operational leadership of Youssef Saadi, had begun a campaign of assassinations directed against European civilians. In 4 days in June, 49 individuals were gunned down. This prompted a backlash by the Europeans, who were known as Pieds Noirs or Blackfeet, because the 19th century settlers were notable for their black leather shoes. On 10th of August, a bomb was detonated in the Rue Thèbes by Pieds Noirs extremists in the heart of the Kasbah, killing 70 people, among them many women and children. The FLN resorted to similar methods. On 30th of September, 3 women, smartly dressed in European-style clothing, deposited bombs that were timed to go off simultaneously in a milk bar, in a popular hangout for teenagers known as the cafeteria, and at an Air France terminus. The bomb at the Air France terminus failed to explode, but the other 2 killed 3 people and seriously injured 50 others, including many children. This tit-for-tat terrorism generated an increasingly insecure and volatile atmosphere in Algiers, which exploded on the 27th of December when an FLN operative, Ali Lapointe, assassinated Amédée Froger, president of the Algerian Federation of Mayors. Europeans ran riot in response, attacking Arab citizens and their businesses indiscriminately, killing 4 innocent Arabs. It is at this point, the conventional starting point of the Battle of Algiers, that the French colonial authorities squared up to the FLN. The French Governor-General in Algiers, Robert Lacoste, brought in General Jacques Massu and the 10th Parachute Division to restore order, effectively giving up civilian authority to the army. 8,000 paratroops were given carte blanche to hunt down and destroy the FLN organization in Algiers. First, they brutally broke a general strike that was proclaimed by the FLN in January, and then they began a remorseless campaign of mass arrests and interrogations, systematically torturing suspects, several thousand of whom simply disappeared. These methods, as well as the use of Muslim informants and spies, led to the unraveling of the FLN organization in Algiers. On February 25th, the French captured Larbi Ben Mahidi, the only member of the FLN leadership remaining in Algiers, who then died in mysterious circumstances in a French prison cell. In June, Youssef Saadi launched another bombing campaign with even more civilian casualties, resulting in renewed Pied Noir violence. But the French were getting closer all the time. Finally cornered in a hiding place in the Kasbah on 24th of September, Saadi was given the choice between surrendering or being blown sky high. Aware that Ali Lapointe was also hiding in a house across the street and likely to be blown up with him, Saadi gave himself up. Ali Lapointe was himself quickly run to ground. On 8th of October, he and his closest associates, the female bomb maker Hasiba Ben Bouali and the child operative Petit Omar, hid behind a wooden partition as the paratroopers laid charges outside. Called upon 3 times to surrender, Lapointe remained silent. In the ensuing explosion, he and his FLN associates were killed, as were 17 innocent Muslim civilians in neighboring houses. The death of Ali Lapointe marked the end of the Battle of Algiers. In purely military terms, the paratroopers had won. Defeat for the FLN, however, was a blessing in disguise. It led to a change of tactics, away from military confrontation and toward international diplomacy. The Battle of Algiers had attracted the world's attention, but the methods used by the French paratroopers to win it divided opinion at home and won France few friends abroad. France had won the Battle of Algiers, but it would lose Algeria. Many of these events are represented accurately and even-handedly by Pontecorvo in the film. This is remarkable when we consider the circumstances in which the film was produced. Filmed on location in Algiers only a few years after Algerian independence, it had the official support of the Algerian government, which was to all intents and purposes the leadership of the FLN. Furthermore, the managing director of the Algerian company that helped produce the film, Kasbah Films, was Yassef Sadi, the FLN's commander during the battle, who after his capture by the French had been sentenced to death 3 times before receiving a pardon from President Charles de Gaulle. Sadi also had a significant part in the film, effectively playing himself as Jafar, the leader who recruits the film's principal FLN protagonist, Ali Lapointe, and explains the FLN's strategy to him. Given these circumstances, one might have expected considerable bias in favor of the FLN, yet the film makes no effort to divert the viewer's gaze from the innocent victims of the first FLN bombs. Before the bombs explode, the camera lingers on an infant at the milk bar and on teenagers dancing at the cafeteria. Afterwards, it surveys the scene of destruction while the same mournful music plays in the background as had accompanied an earlier scene where Muslim victims were dug out from under the rubble of the Pied Noir bomb that had been exploded in the Kasbah. Even more striking than this acknowledgement of the tragic consequences of the FLN strategy is that the film passes up the easy opportunity to demonize the French for resorting to torture as an essential weapon in their battle with the FLN. Unlike the FLN protagonists, the paratroop commander in the film, Colonel Mathieu, is a fictional character, modeled on 2 real-life soldiers who had significant parts to play in the Battle of Algiers. One was Colonel Marcel Bijard, who commanded one of the regiments charged with restoring French authority in the Kasbah, and the other was Colonel Yves Godard, who directed French military intelligence. Mathieu, far from a monster or a brute, is an intelligent, articulate, and clear-thinking leader who exudes a confident authority and is entirely at ease with the strategy he has devised to win the Battle of Algiers. Confronted by a journalist at a press conference with the accusation that this strategy involved the use of torture, Mathieu acknowledges this without batting an eyelid. He succinctly explains that to accomplish the job he has been given, there is no other way. At no point does the film challenge his logic. In fact, the film makes it clear that it was by means of torture that the army was able to fill in the blanks on the FLN's organizational chart and to track down its leaders. In the film, it is an Arab suspect, tortured to the point of exhaustion, who finally leads the paratroopers to Ali Lapointe's hiding place. In the mutual respect between Ben Mahidi, who justifies the FLN's use of homemade bombs, and Colonel Mathieu, who justifies the French use of torture, there is a recognition that each side has adopted the means best suited to its circumstances. A half-century later, the film's sympathetic, glamorous representations of both the urban terrorist and of the military counter-terrorist make uncomfortable viewing. We live in a world in which suicide bombers regularly cause death and devastation on a scale which greatly exceeds that caused by the bombs of the FLN. We have also become far too familiar with the use of state-sponsored torture in prisons like those of Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo Bay. The Battle of Algiers is still studied by both revolutionaries and by counterinsurgency specialists for the lessons it holds. In this respect, it is worth noting the judgment of historian Alastair Horn that it was the use of torture which, because of the revulsion it caused at home and abroad, was a primary reason for France losing the war. In 2005, Horn sent a copy of A Savage War of Peace, his classic book on the Algerian War to American Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, warning him against the use of torture. Horn says he received a flea in the ear for his trouble. Pontecorvo's film refrains from passing moral judgment, but it does map out for us the moral contours of the asymmetric warfare that has become a characteristic feature of the contemporary world.